I opened my husband's notebook and found a note. If she finds out the truth, I'm done for. My hands started shaking. On the next page, I saw bank statements for $5 million. I called a lawyer and I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I had been married to Richard for 42 years. 42 years of what I thought was a good, honest life together. We raised 3 children in our modest home in Ohio, watched them graduate, get married, give us 5 beautiful grandchildren. Richard worked as an accountant for a local manufacturing company until his retirement 3 years ago. I spent my career as an elementary school teacher. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable, or so I believed. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when I noticed Richard's briefcase lying open on his desk. He had gone to the grocery store, something he rarely did. Usually, I handled all the shopping, but that morning he had insisted, almost forcefully, that he needed to go himself. It struck me as odd. As I walked past his desk, a leather-bound notebook caught my eye. I had never seen it before. Richard had always been a private person about his work papers, but we'd been married for over 4 decades. We didn't keep secrets, did we? My hand reached for the notebook before my mind could stop it. I told myself I was just curious, that there was nothing wrong with looking, but my heart was already beating faster. I opened it to the first page. The words were written in Richard's unmistakable handwriting, neat and precise. If she finds out the truth, I'm finished. My hands started to shake. She? Who was she? And what truth? I felt a cold sensation spreading through my chest, like ice water in my veins. How many times had I heard stories about men leading double lives? About wives who never suspected until it was too late? I turned the page, my fingers trembling. Bank statements, dozens of them. Accounts I had never seen before. Banks I didn't recognize. And the numbers. Oh God, the numbers. My eyes scanned the columns, barely believing what I was seeing. Deposits, transfers, balances that made no sense. $5 million. I had to sit down. My legs wouldn't hold me anymore. $5 million? Where did Richard get $5 million? We had our retirement savings, maybe $340,000 combined between our 401ks and savings accounts. I knew exactly how much we had because I reviewed our finances every month. I was the one who balanced our checkbook, who paid our bills. But this was impossible. I flipped through more pages. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. Statements from banks in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Delaware. Delaware? Why would Richard have secret accounts in Delaware? My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was he hiding money from me? Was he planning to leave me? After 42 years, was he going to abandon me with nothing while he ran off with millions? Or was it something darker? Had Richard been stealing from his company all those years? Was this embezzlement? Money laundering? I thought about all the times he'd stayed late at the office, all the business trips he'd taken. Had he been lying to me this entire time? I heard the garage door opening. Richard was back. Panic seized me. I quickly closed the notebook and placed it exactly where I'd found it, my hands still shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. I rushed back to the laundry basket, grabbed a towel, and pretended to fold it as I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs. "Margaret," he called out. "I'm home. They were out of that bread you like, so I got the wheat instead." His voice sounded so normal, so ordinary, like he was the same man I'd woken up next to that morning. But he wasn't, was he? I didn't know who Richard was anymore. "That's fine," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. "Just leave it in the kitchen." I listened to him walk away, heard him rustling with the grocery bags downstairs. And I stood there in our bedroom, holding that towel, staring at that innocent-looking notebook on his desk. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, about the man I'd spent 4 decades with, it was all a lie. The question was, what was I going to do about it? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside Richard in our bed, listening to his steady breathing, wondering how he could sleep so peacefully while my entire world was crumbling. Every few minutes, I'd glance at him in the darkness, studying his profile. Was this the face of a criminal? A cheater? Both? I ran through everything in my mind, cataloging the damage. If this was embezzlement, Richard could go to prison. Our reputation in the community would be destroyed. Our children. Oh God, our children. How would Jessica, Michael, and David react when they learned their father was a thief? And our grandchildren? Would they grow up ashamed of their grandfather's name? If Richard was planning to leave me, I could lose everything. Without access to that hidden money, I'd be left with whatever the court decided to give me in a divorce. And if he'd been clever enough to hide $5 million, he'd be clever enough to hide it from a judge, too. But there was another possibility that terrified me even more. What if this money was connected to something dangerous? What if Richard owed someone? What if he was being blackmailed? That note. If she finds out the truth, I'm finished. It didn't sound like the words of a confident man. It sounded like fear. By 3 a.m, I had made my decision. I couldn't confront Richard directly. Not yet. If he was hiding something this big, he'd have prepared explanations, excuses. He might even gaslight me, make me think I'd misunderstood what I'd seen. After 42 years of marriage, he knew exactly how to manipulate my emotions. No. I needed information first. I needed leverage. I needed a lawyer. The next morning, I went through my usual routine. I made Richard his coffee, scrambled his eggs, kissed him goodbye as he left for his Tuesday golf game with his friends from the club. I smiled. I acted normal. But inside, I was someone else entirely. As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my purse and drove to the public library 3 towns over. I wasn't going to risk using my home computer or my phone. Richard had always been good with technology. For all I knew, he could be monitoring everything I did. At the library, I used their computer to search for divorce attorneys, not local ones. I couldn't risk anyone recognizing me or word getting back to Richard. I found a firm in Columbus about an hour away. The website showed a woman named Patricia Calloway, specializing in high-asset divorces and cases involving hidden marital property. Perfect. I used the library's phone to call her office. My hands were shaking again as I dialed. Calloway and Associates? A receptionist answered. Yes, hello. I'd like to schedule a consultation with Ms. Calloway, please. It's urgent. May I have your name? I hesitated. Then, Margaret Anderson. But I need to be very clear. This consultation must be completely confidential. My husband cannot know I'm calling. There was a pause. I understand, Mrs. Anderson. Ms. Calloway can see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Will that work? Tomorrow? Yes. I could tell Richard I was going shopping with my friend Carol, something I did every Wednesday anyway. That's perfect. Thank you. I hung up and sat there in the library for a long moment, staring at my trembling hands. What was I doing? Was I really going to hire a divorce attorney? After 42 years? But then I thought about that notebook. That note. Those bank statements. $5 million that Richard had hidden from me. $5 million that by law was half mine. I thought about all the years I'd spent teaching, saving every penny, clipping coupons, buying store-brand groceries to stretch our budget. I'd worn the same winter coat for 7 years. I'd suggested we skip family vacations to save money. And all that time, Richard had been sitting on $5 million. The fear I'd felt the night before was transforming into something else. Something harder. Something colder. Anger. I drove home and made myself lunch. Turkey sandwich, no cheese. Cheese was expensive. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Then I went upstairs, and while Richard was still gone, I took out my phone and photographed every single page of that notebook. Every bank statement, every account number, every wire transfer. Evidence. If Richard wanted to play games, I'd play too. But I'd play to win. Patricia Calloway's office was nothing like I'd expected. I had pictured something cold and corporate, all glass and steel. Instead, her consultation room was warm, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. She was a woman in her 50s, with sharp eyes and a kind smile that somehow made me feel both safe and terrified. Patricia set down the phone and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Anderson, Margaret, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Do you have any reason to believe this money came from illegal sources? Drug trafficking? Organized crime? Anything like that?" No, the word came out too quickly, too defensive. But was I sure? No, I repeated more calmly. Richard was an accountant. He worked for the same manufacturing company for 38 years. He's boring. He golfs. He watches historical documentaries. He's not a criminal. People can surprise us, Patricia said gently, especially the people we think we know best. The note you photographed, if she finds out the truth, I'm finished. That suggests he's very afraid of something. We need to find out what. She pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. Here's what I recommend. First, we hire a private investigator. We need to know where this money came from, whether there are more hidden accounts, and what your husband is actually doing with his time. Second, you don't confront him yet. Not until we have a complete picture. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "Tell me what's going on." I handed her my phone with the photographs I'd taken. "I found these in my husband's private notebook. He doesn't know I've seen them." She scrolled through the images, her expression remaining professionally neutral, though I saw her eyebrows rise slightly when she reached the account balances. $5 million, she said quietly. "And you had no knowledge of these accounts?" "None. We've been married 42 years. I thought I knew everything about our finances." My voice cracked. "I thought I knew him." Patricia set down the phone and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Anderson, Margaret, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Do you have any reason to believe this money came from illegal sources? Drug trafficking, organized crime, anything like that?" No. The word came out too quickly, too defensive. But was I sure? No, I repeated more calmly. Richard was an accountant. He worked for the same manufacturing company for 38 years. He's boring. He golfs. He watches historical documentaries. He's not a criminal. People can surprise us, Patricia said gently. Especially the people we think we know best. The note you photographed, if she finds out the truth, I'm finished. That suggests he's very afraid of something. We need to find out what. She pulled out a legal pad and began taking notes. Here's what I recommend. First, we hire a private investigator. We need to know where this money came from, whether there are more hidden accounts, and what your husband is actually doing with his time. Second, you don't confront him yet. Not until we have a complete picture. A private investigator? The words felt surreal. Like in the movies? Like in real life, Patricia corrected. I work with someone excellent, discreet, thorough, fast. His name is James Chen, former FBI. Former FBI. God, what was my life becoming? How much will this cost? I asked, then almost laughed at myself. Richard was hiding $5 million, and I was worried about the cost of an investigator. James charges $200 an hour. For a case like this, probably $5,000 to $10,000 total. Can you access that without your husband knowing? I thought about our joint savings account. Yes, I can take it out in cash withdrawals over a few weeks. Richard never checks the statements. I'm the one who handles all that. Good. Patricia made another note. Margaret, I need you to understand something. Once we start this process, there's no going back. We might discover things you don't want to know. Are you prepared for that? Was I? I looked down at my hands, at the wedding ring I'd worn for 42 years. The diamond was small. We'd been young and poor when Richard proposed. He'd promised he'd buy me a bigger one someday when we could afford it. Apparently, someday had come. He just hadn't bothered to tell me. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. James Chen started surveillance the following Monday. I continued my normal routine, playing the obedient wife, making Richard his meals, smiling when he kissed me goodbye. It was easier than I'd expected, this performance. Maybe I'd been performing our whole marriage without realizing it. 4 days later, James called Patricia's office. She conference called me in. Mrs. Anderson, James said, his voice calm and professional. I need to show you some photographs. Are you somewhere private? I was in my car, parked at the grocery store. Yes. I'm sending them to Ms. Calloway's secure server now. My phone buzzed. Patricia had forwarded them. The first photo showed Richard's car parked outside a coffee shop I didn't recognize. The second showed him inside, sitting across from a woman. She was young, maybe 35, with long dark hair and expensive clothes. They were leaning close, talking intently. The third photo showed Richard handing her an envelope. The fourth showed her kissing him on the cheek as they stood to leave. I sat in my car, staring at those images, and felt something inside me go very, very cold. Her name is Diana Reeves, James's voice came through the phone. She's a financial consultant, works for a private wealth management firm. And Mrs. Anderson, she's been meeting with your husband twice a week for the past 6 months. 6 months. Keep following them, I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant. I want to know everything. Patricia worked fast. Within a week, we had a complete financial picture that made my stomach turn. Richard hadn't just hidden $5 million. He'd systematically moved our marital assets into accounts only he could access. Our retirement funds, which I thought were safely invested, had been gradually drained over the past 3 years. The money I believed we had? It didn't exist anymore. He'd moved it all, piece by piece, into offshore accounts with Diana Reeves listed as a co-beneficiary. He's been planning this for years, Patricia said, spreading the documents across her desk. This isn't impulsive. This is calculated theft of marital property. And the fact that he added Diana Reeves to these accounts suggests they're planning something together. He's leaving me, I said flatly. It wasn't a question anymore. It looks that way, but here's the good news, Margaret. He hasn't done it yet, which means we can act first. The plan was surgical. On a Friday morning, while Richard was at his golf game, Patricia filed an emergency motion with the family court. We requested an immediate freeze on all accounts, including the hidden ones. We cited the evidence of asset dissipation and the risk of Richard transferring money beyond the court's jurisdiction. I'd also done something else, something Patricia hadn't advised but hadn't discouraged either. I'd moved $50,000 from our joint account into a new account in only my name. After 42 years of contributing to our marriage, I figured I'd earned at least that much security. The court granted our motion that same afternoon. By 5 o'clock, every single account, Richard's hidden millions included, was frozen. He couldn't access a penny without court approval. I was at home, making dinner like always, when Richard came through the door. I heard it immediately in his footsteps. Something was wrong. He stormed into the kitchen, his face red, his eyes wild. "What did you do?" he shouted. "What the hell did you do, Margaret?" I turned from the stove, forcing my hands to stay steady. "I protected myself. I protected what's legally mine. You had no right. Those accounts are private. They're marital property, Richard. You had no right to hide them from me for 3 years." For a moment, I thought he might have a heart attack. His face went from red to purple. "You've been spying on me? Going through my things?" "You left your notebook out," I said calmly. "The one with the note about how you're finished if I find out the truth." "Well, Richard, I found out. And yes, you are finished." He stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Richard went to answer it, and I heard a woman's voice, sharp, angry, educated. "Diana Reeves." I walked to the foyer. She was even more striking in person, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. She looked at me with cold hatred. "You have no idea what you've done," Diana said. "Those accounts, you've frozen everything. Richard has business obligations, financial commitments. You're going to destroy his reputation." "His reputation?" I almost laughed. "He's been stealing from me for 3 years and planning to abandon me. I don't care about his reputation." "This isn't just about you," Richard said, his voice low and dangerous. "There are other people involved, important people. If you don't unfreeze those accounts, there will be consequences." Was that a threat? After 42 years of marriage, was my husband actually threatening me? "The only consequences," I said, my voice like ice, "will be legal ones. For both of you. I have a lawyer, I have evidence, and I have court orders. If you want access to any of that money, you'll have to explain to a judge where it came from and why you hid it." Diana's eyes narrowed. "We could make things very difficult for you, Margaret. Very difficult. You have grandchildren, don't you? Would hate for your family to be embarrassed by all this." That was when I knew I'd won this round. They were scared. They were threatening because they had no other leverage. "Get out of my house," I said. "Both of you." Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but Diana touched his arm. They exchanged a glance, one that confirmed everything I'd suspected. They were partners, co-conspirators, and I'd just checkmated them. After they left, I locked the door and sat down on the stairs, my whole body shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from power. I called Patricia. They came to the house. They threatened me. "Document everything," she said immediately. "Every word they said. We'll get a restraining order if necessary." For the next 3 days, I stayed with my daughter, Jessica. I told her I needed a break, that Richard and I were having problems. She didn't push for details, just hugged me and made up the guest room. I slept for 12 hours straight that first night, the sleep of someone who'd been carrying a terrible weight and finally set it down. I needed this. I needed to breathe before the next battle. The call came on Tuesday morning. Richard's voice on the phone was soft, remorseful, a tone I hadn't heard in years. "Margaret, please, can we talk? Just the two of us. I need to explain everything." I was back at home now, having returned from Jessica's. I felt stronger, clearer. 3 days of rest had given me perspective. "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Not over the phone. Please, come meet me for lunch, that Italian place you like, Romano's. 1 o'clock. I'll explain everything, I promise." Every instinct screamed at me that this was a trap. But I was curious. I wanted to hear what explanation he could possibly offer. And besides, I'd be in a public place. He couldn't threaten me in a crowded restaurant. "Fine, 1 o'clock. I called Patricia immediately after. "He wants to meet. Should I wear a wire?" "No," she said. But keep your phone in your pocket with the voice recorder on. Legal in Ohio, as long as you're party to the conversation. At Romano's, Richard was already seated in a corner booth. He stood when I arrived, a gentleman's gesture that now felt like mockery. How many times had he opened doors for me, pulled out chairs, while planning to steal millions and abandon me? "Margaret," he said, and I saw tears in his eyes. Actual tears. "Thank you for coming. I know I don't deserve it." I sat down across from him, my phone recording everything in my purse. "Talk." "I made terrible mistakes," he began. "The money, it's not what you think. I wasn't trying to leave you. I was trying to protect you. Protect me by hiding millions of dollars? Protect me by adding another woman to secret bank accounts? Deanna is just a financial consultant. I needed someone who understood offshore banking, tax shelters. The money, Margaret, it came from my father's estate." I blinked. Richard's father had died 4 years ago. "Your father's estate was $150,000. We received that money. It went into our retirement account." "That's what I told you," Richard said, leaning forward. "But there was more. Much more. Dad had investments I didn't know about. When they liquidated after his death, it came to nearly $6 million. But there was a problem. Tax issues. Legal complications. I had to move it offshore temporarily to protect it from the IRS. It was a good story. Smooth. Practiced. Almost believable." "And the note?" I asked. "If she finds out the truth, I'm finished." "What truth were you afraid of, Richard?" He looked down at his hands. "The tax situation. If the IRS discovered what I'd done before, I could properly restructure everything. Margaret, I could have gone to prison. I didn't want you implicated. I was trying to protect you from legal liability. By lying to me for 3 years. I was going to tell you," he insisted, "once everything was properly settled. I was planning to surprise you. The money is for us, for our retirement. We could travel, help the kids, leave something substantial for the grandchildren. Diana was just helping me navigate the legal complexities." The waiter came by. Richard ordered wine. I ordered water. "If this is true," I said slowly, "why did Diana threaten my family the other day? Why did she say she could make things difficult for me?" Richard's face hardened for just a second. A flash of the real emotion beneath the performance. Then it smoothed out again. "She was upset. The account freeze put her in a difficult position with her firm. She shouldn't have said those things. I've spoken to her about it. I want to believe you," I said. And part of me, the part that had loved this man for 42 years, actually did want to believe him. It would be so much easier. I could unfreeze the accounts. We could work this out. Everything could go back to normal. But normal had been a lie. "If what you're saying is true," I continued, "you won't mind proving it. Show everything to my attorney. Provide documentation about your father's estate, the tax issues, all of it. If this money is legitimately ours, we'll restructure it properly and move forward." "Of course," Richard said quickly. Too quickly. "Absolutely. I'll have Diana send over all the documentation. Not Diana, your documentation. From your father's estate attorney, the IRS, the banks. Primary sources." His smile faltered. "Margaret, you don't trust me?" "No, Richard, I don't." I stood up. I hadn't touched my water. "When you're ready to tell me the truth, the real truth, you know where to find me. Until then, the accounts stay frozen, and my attorney stays involved in everything." I walked out, leaving him sitting there alone. In my car, I called my best friend Carol, who I'd known since our children were in elementary school together. I told her everything, every detail. The notebook, the money, Diana, all of it. "Oh, honey," she said, "I'm so sorry, but I'm also proud of you. You're handling this like a warrior." I don't feel like a warrior. I feel like my whole life was a lie." "Maybe it was," Carol said gently. "But you're writing a new truth now. And this time, you're in control." She was right, and I wasn't going to give up that control. Not for Richard's crocodile tears. Not for anyone. They came to the house together 3 days later on a Saturday morning. I saw them pull up through the living room window, Richard's car, with Diana in the passenger seat. They walked up to my door side by side, like a couple, like they belonged together. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. I wanted to see how far they'd go. "Margaret," Richard said when I opened the door, his voice sickeningly sweet. "We've brought documents, everything you asked for. Can we come in and discuss this like adults?" Diana stood behind him, holding a briefcase, her expression carefully neutral. Professional. But her eyes were calculating. Against my better judgment, I let them in. We sat in my living room, the room where Richard and I had celebrated Christmases, where our grandchildren played, where I'd built a life I thought was real. Diana opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Mrs. Anderson, I want to apologize for my behavior last week. I was unprofessional. The account freeze created problems at my firm, and I took my frustration out on you. That was wrong." It sounded sincere, rehearsed, but sincere. She slid the folder across the coffee table to me. "These are documents regarding Mr. Anderson's father's estate. As you can see, there were significant holdings that went through probate over an extended period." I opened the folder. There were papers, legal documents, estate valuations, bank statements. They looked legitimate, but something felt wrong. The dates, maybe? The signatures? "I'd like my attorney to review these," I said. "Of course," Diana said smoothly. "That's completely reasonable. But Margaret, may I call you Margaret?" I didn't answer. She continued anyway. "I want you to understand something. This freeze is hurting everyone. Your husband has commitments, obligations. There are people depending on this money being accessible." "What people?" I asked. Richard and Diana exchanged a glance. Then Richard leaned forward, his face earnest. "Margaret, I haven't been completely honest with you. The money, some of it is committed to an investment opportunity, a very time-sensitive opportunity. If we don't move on it soon, we could lose millions." "We?" I asked coldly. "You and me," Richard corrected quickly. "Our money, our opportunity. But the freeze is preventing us from acting. Every day we wait, we lose potential returns. We could turn 5 million into 10 million, Margaret. Think about what that would mean for our grandchildren." There it was. The real play. Not reconciliation, not truth. Just greed, dressed up as opportunity. "What kind of investment?" I asked. Diana pulled out more papers. "A commercial real estate development in Florida. Waterfront property. The developers are offering early investors a ground floor opportunity, but they need commitments by the end of the month. After that, the opportunity closes." "And how much would we need to commit?" 2 million, Diana said. "But the projected returns are substantial. Within 5 years, you'd triple your investment." I looked at the papers she'd handed me. Glossy brochures, artist renderings of luxury condos. It looked impressive. It also looked exactly like the kind of scheme that separated fools from their money. "No," I said. Richard's expression cracked. "Margaret, you're not thinking clearly. This is our future." "No, Richard. It's your scheme, your lies. I'm not signing anything, I'm not unfreezing anything, and I'm certainly not investing in whatever this is." Diana's professional mask slipped. Her voice turned hard. "Mrs. Anderson, I don't think you understand the position you're in. Your husband has connections, friends in the financial world. If you continue this obstruction, you'll find yourself very isolated. Your children might start hearing things about you, about your mental state, about your instability." I felt a chill run down my spine. Are you threatening to lie about me to my own children? I'm telling you the consequences of being unreasonable, Diana said, her eyes cold. Richard has been nothing but patient with you. He's tried to include you, to share this wealth with you. But if you continue to be difficult, well, there are other options. Legal options. He could have you declared incompetent. You're almost 70, Margaret. People might believe you're not capable of handling complex financial decisions. Richard put his hand on Diana's arm, a warning gesture, but he didn't contradict her. He just sat there, letting her threaten me. My husband of 42 years, letting his mistress threaten to destroy my relationship with my own children. Something inside me went from cold to frozen. I stood up. Get out of my house. Margaret, Richard started. Get out, I shouted. I hadn't raised my voice in years, but now it filled the room, shook the windows. Both of you, get out right now or I'm calling the police. Diana stood, her face flushed with anger. You're making a huge mistake. The only mistake I made was not seeing what you were 42 years sooner. Now get out. They left. Richard looked back once from the doorway, his expression a mixture of anger and something else. Fear, maybe. Good. He should be afraid. After they were gone, I locked the door and slid down against it, my heart pounding. My hands were shaking again, like they had when I first found that notebook. But this time, it wasn't fear making them shake. It was rage. They thought they could intimidate me, threaten my children, declare me incompetent. I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. They just threatened to have me declared incompetent and to turn my children against me. Did you record it? Patricia asked immediately. I looked at my phone. Yes. The recorder had been running the entire time. Every word, I said. Perfect. Forward it to me. This changes everything, Margaret. This is harassment, attempted coercion. We can use this. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, feeling the fear slowly transform into something harder, something unbreakable. They wanted a war, I'd give them a war, but I'd fight it my way. With truth, with evidence, with the law on my side, and I would win. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, 2 weeks after Diana and Richard's visit. Patricia had moved fast, filing motions based on the recording, requesting a full accounting of all marital assets and an investigation into the source of the hidden funds. Richard had hired his own attorney, a slick corporate lawyer named Mitchell Brenner, who wore $1,000 suits and spoke in carefully crafted sentences. Diana sat behind Richard in the courtroom, her expression confident. They thought they were going to win. They thought I was just a scared old woman who'd back down. They had no idea what was coming. Judge Ellen Morrison was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, with reading glasses perched on her nose and a reputation for seeing through bullshit. Patricia said that was good for us. I hoped she was right. Mrs. Anderson, Mitchell Brenner began, standing up with theatrical concern. My client is deeply troubled by these proceedings. He's been married to you for 42 years. He loves you. He's trying to secure your future together. And instead of gratitude, you've responded with suspicion and legal action. Objection, Patricia said calmly. This is opening argument, Your Honor, not questioning. Sustained. Mr. Brenner, get to the point. Brenner nodded. Mrs. Anderson, isn't it true that you accessed your husband's private financial documents without permission? I found a notebook on his desk, I said clearly, in our shared home. It wasn't locked away, it was open. And you photographed these private documents and shared them with an attorney. I documented evidence of hidden marital assets, yes. Hidden or properly managed? My client is a trained accountant. He was responsibly managing family investments. By hiding them from his wife? Patricia interjected. Your Honor, if Mr. Brenner wants to claim these were legitimate investments, we'd like to see proof, documentation, tax returns showing this income, legal basis for offshore accounts. Judge Morrison looked at Brenner. Counselor, do you have this documentation? We have the estate documents from Mr. Anderson's father, Brenner said, producing the same folder Diana had shown me, clearly showing the source of these funds. Patricia stood. Your Honor, we had those documents examined by a forensic accountant and an estate attorney. They're falsified. The dates don't match probate records. The signatures don't match known examples of the deceased's signature. And most tellingly, the estate attorney listed on these documents doesn't exist. There's no lawyer by that name registered in Ohio or any surrounding state. The courtroom went silent. I watched Richard's face drain of color. Your Honor, Brenner stammered, we'll need time to verify. These are forged documents? Judge Morrison's voice could have cut glass. You brought forged documents into my courtroom? There must be some mistake. Mr. Anderson, the judge said, looking directly at Richard. Stand up. Richard stood, his legs visibly shaking. Where did this money come from? My father's estate, Your Honor. As the documents show. The forged documents? Judge Morrison's eyes were steel. Mr. Anderson, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I suggest you think very carefully before answering. Where did $5 million come from? Richard looked at his lawyer, at Diana, back at the judge. His mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Your Honor, Patricia said, we have evidence suggesting Mr. Anderson may have been embezzling from his former employer. We've found a pattern of transfers that coincide with his last 3 years of employment before retirement. That's absurd! Richard finally found his voice. I would never— Then explain the money, Judge Morrison said. Right now, or I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for criminal investigation. I watched my husband fall apart. The confident facade crumbled. His hands shook. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Diana stood up suddenly. Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement. Everyone turned to look at her. She was pale but composed. The money, she said slowly, came from a private investment fund I manage. Mr. Anderson was one of several clients who invested with me. The offshore accounts were set up for tax optimization purposes. Illegal tax evasion, you mean? Patricia asked. Diana's jaw tightened. Legal tax minimization strategies? And the forged estate documents? Those were Mr. Anderson's idea. He didn't want his wife to know about the investments. He thought if she believed it was inheritance, she'd be more accepting. I watched Richard stare at Diana in horror. She was throwing him under the bus to save herself. Your Honor, Diana continued, I recommended against the deception. I advised Mr. Anderson multiple times to be honest with his wife. I have emails documenting this. But he insisted on discretion. You're lying, Richard shouted. It was your idea, all of it. The offshore accounts, the fake documents, everything. And there it was. They were turning on each other. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Enough. Both of you will be providing testimony to investigators. Mr. Anderson, all marital assets remain frozen pending further investigation. Miss Reeves, you're to provide all documentation related to these accounts within 72 hours. And both of you should consider retaining criminal defense attorneys. She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. Mrs. Anderson, I'm sorry you've had to endure this. The court will ensure you're protected during this process. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I'd won. They were caught, exposed, turning on each other like rats in a trap. As we left the courtroom, I saw Richard trying to talk to Diana in the hallway. She walked away from him without a word, her phone already to her ear, probably calling her own lawyer. 42 years. And this was how it ended. Not with love, not with dignity, with lies exposed and loyalty shattered. But I was still standing, and that was what mattered. The investigation took 3 months. 3 months during which the careful structure of Richard and Diana's deception came apart thread by thread. It turned out Patricia's suspicions about embezzlement were correct. Richard had been stealing from his company for years, small amounts at first, then larger sums as he got bolder. He'd hidden it cleverly, spreading the theft across multiple accounts and fiscal years. But once investigators started looking, the pattern became obvious. Diana's investment fund was even worse. It was essentially a Ponzi scheme, using money from new clients to pay returns to older ones. She'd been targeting wealthy retirees, people who trusted her professional credentials and sophisticated sales pitch. Richard had been both her accomplice and her mark, helping her find new victims while simultaneously investing his stolen millions. The grand jury indicted both of them. Richard faced charges of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. Diana faced those same charges plus securities fraud and operating an unlicensed investment scheme. I testified at both trials. I sat in the witness box and told the truth about the notebook, about the threats, about everything. Richard couldn't look at me. Diana stared at me with cold hatred, but I stared right back. I wasn't afraid anymore. Richard's trial came first. His lawyer tried to paint him as a victim, a man who'd made mistakes, who'd been manipulated by Diana. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. 8 years. He was 70 years old. He might not live to see freedom again. Diana's trial was faster. She tried to make a deal, offering to testify against Richard in exchange for a lighter sentence. But Richard had already been convicted, so her testimony was worthless. She got 12 years. While the criminal cases proceeded, our divorce moved forward. The frozen accounts were unfrozen once investigators cataloged everything. Of the $5 million, about $2 million had come from Richard's embezzlement. That money would go to his former employer as restitution. Another $1 million had been Diana's Ponzi scheme funds, which would be distributed to her victims. That left $2 million in legitimately acquired assets, our actual retirement savings, our home equity, everything we'd built together over 42 years. I got it all. The judge ruled that given Richard's criminal activity and attempted asset concealment, he'd forfeited any claim to marital property. Every penny went to me. The house, the remaining savings, even his pension. Richard's lawyer filed appeals, of course, but they went nowhere. Richard had signed legal documents attempting to defraud me. He'd threatened me. He'd conspired to have me declared incompetent. The law was not on his side. Our children took it hard. Jessica cried for days. Michael stopped speaking to his father entirely. David, the youngest, tried to maintain a relationship but struggled. How do you reconcile the father you thought you knew with the criminal he'd become? The grandchildren were confused. "Why is Grandpa going to jail?" my youngest granddaughter asked. I told her that Grandpa had made very bad choices, broken important rules, and now had to face the consequences. It was the simplest truth I could offer. The community reaction was mixed. Some people blamed me, whispered that I should have stood by my husband, that I'd been too harsh. But most people supported me. Carol organized a group of my friends who showed up at the trials every day, sitting behind me in a show of solidarity. My old teaching colleagues from the school district started a fundraiser to help with legal costs. They raised $15,000. I tried to refuse it, but they insisted. "You taught our children," the principal said. "You gave to this community for 30 years. Let us give back." The day the divorce was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse into bright autumn sunshine. Patricia walked with me. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it. I'd lost my marriage, lost the man I'd spent 42 years with, lost the future I'd imagined for our old age. But I'd gained something more important. "Free," I said. "I feel free." The house felt different now, emptier but also lighter. I redecorated, painting over the colors Richard had chosen, rearranging furniture, making it mine. I'd won. Completely. Without compromise. Richard was in prison. Diana was in prison. I had the money, the house, my dignity, and the truth on my side. It wasn't the ending I'd wanted for my marriage, but it was the ending I'd fought for. And I'd fought like hell. Some victories aren't happy, but they're still victories. And this one was mine. The first year after the divorce was healing. I focused on myself in ways I never had before. I joined a yoga class at the community center, started taking watercolor painting lessons, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I read books for pleasure, traveled to visit friends I hadn't seen in years. Carol and I took a trip to Italy that spring. 2 widows, well, 1 widow, and 1 divorcee, drinking wine in Tuscany and laughing about how we'd wasted so much time worrying about what men thought. We toured ancient ruins, ate incredible food, and stayed out dancing until midnight in Florence. I felt 20 years younger. "You're glowing," Jessica told me when I got back. "I haven't seen you this happy in maybe ever?" She was right. Even before Richard's betrayal, I'd been stressed, anxious, always trying to make everything perfect, always trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect grandmother. Now, I was just Margaret, and Margaret was doing fine. I used some of the settlement money to help my children, paid off Jessica's mortgage, helped Michael start the business he'd been dreaming about for years, a craft brewery that was already winning awards, set up college funds for all 5 grandchildren that would cover their entire education, undergraduate and graduate school both. "Mom, this is too much," David protested when I gave him a check to cover his family's medical debt. "It's not too much," I said. "It's what this money should have been used for all along, family, not schemes and lies." I also donated to causes that mattered to me. A women's shelter in town received a substantial check. I knew too well now how financial abuse trapped women in bad situations. The local library got funding for their literacy program. My old elementary school received new art supplies for every classroom. Each donation felt like reclaiming something Richard had stolen. Not just money, but purpose, dignity, the ability to make a difference. I also did something for myself, something I'd dreamed about for 30 years but never thought possible. I went back to school. At 68 years old, I enrolled in a master's program in art history at the State University. The other students were mostly in their 20s, but they welcomed me. I became a kind of class grandmother, hosting study sessions at my house, baking cookies for exam weeks. My thesis was on Renaissance women artists, the ones who'd been overlooked by history because they were women. I felt a kinship with them. They'd fought to be seen, to be recognized, to claim their rightful place. Just like I had. The department chair told me my thesis was one of the strongest they'd seen in years. They asked if I'd consider pursuing a PhD. At 70, why not? I had the time, I had the money, I had the passion. I started dating too. Nothing serious. Just coffee with a retired professor I'd met at the university. Dinner with a widower from my painting class. It felt strange at first, being with men who weren't Richard. But it also felt liberating. These men saw me as I was now, strong, independent, educated. Not as the submissive wife I'd been trained to be. Life was good, better than good. I'd found myself. Richard, meanwhile, was discovering what it meant to lose everything. Prison was hard on him. He was older than most inmates, softer. He'd lived a comfortable middle-class life and suddenly found himself in a cell with a convicted drug dealer. His lawyer told me Richard had been beaten twice in the first 6 months. Once badly enough to require hospitalization. I didn't feel sorry for him. His former employer sued him civilly for the full amount of the embezzlement plus damages. Even after his prison sentence ended, he'd be financially ruined for life, making restitution payments from whatever meager work he could find as a convicted felon. Our children visited him sporadically. Jessica went once and came back crying, saying she couldn't do it again. Michael refused to go at all. David went monthly out of obligation but told me the visits were painful and awkward. "He just complains," David said, "about the food, the other inmates, the guards. He never asks about us, about the grandkids. It's all about him and how unfair everything is. Richard had also developed health problems in prison: high blood pressure, diabetes from the terrible institutional food. He'd aged 10 years in 2. His hair had gone completely white. He walked with a shuffle now, defeated. The grandchildren didn't ask about him anymore. I'd told them the truth, age-appropriate versions of it. Grandpa had stolen money and hurt people. Grandpa was in jail because he'd broken the law. They'd absorbed it and moved on with the resilience of children. Diana's fate was even worse in some ways. Her Ponzi scheme had defrauded dozens of people, many of them elderly like Richard and me. Some had lost their entire life savings. The victims' impact statements at her sentencing had been devastating. People describing how they'd lost their homes, their security, their trust in other humans. Her professional licenses were revoked. Her family disowned her. And in prison, she had no special skills that made her valuable. Richard at least could do people's taxes, help with accounting. Diana just had her charm, and charm didn't work behind bars. I heard through my attorney that Diana had tried to write me a letter, offering an apology in exchange for a letter of support for her parole hearing. I threw it away without reading it. Some wounds didn't deserve forgiveness. One afternoon, I ran into someone who'd known Diana professionally, a former colleague from her wealth management firm. Over coffee, she told me how Diana's arrest had destroyed the firm's reputation. They'd had to close down entirely. Dozens of legitimate employees lost their jobs because of her fraud. She seemed so professional, the woman said, shaking her head. So trustworthy, I never would have guessed. That was Diana's skill. The mask. The performance. She'd fooled everyone, including Richard. Maybe especially Richard. I was 70 years old now, 2 years after the divorce. I woke up every morning in my sunny bedroom, redecorated in blues and yellows, colors that made me happy. I made coffee just for myself, strong and black the way I liked it, not weak and sweet the way Richard had preferred. I had my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my art classes, my freedom. They had prison cells and regret. I'd say that was justice. Looking back now, 3 years later, I understand what that notebook taught me. Trust, yes, but verify. Love, yes, but protect yourself. Be kind, yes, but never let kindness become weakness. For 42 years, I let Richard handle everything. I trusted blindly. I made myself dependent. Never again. To every woman watching this, especially you older ladies like me, know your finances. Check the accounts. Ask questions. You've earned equal access to every dollar in your marriage. And if something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore your instincts the way I did for too long. My only regret? That I didn't find that notebook sooner. What would you have done in my place? Would you have fought, or would you have walked away quietly? Leave a comment below. I read everyone. And if this story helped you, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening to this old woman's story. May you never need to use these lessons. But if you do, may you have the courage to fight for what's yours. Remember, you're never too old to start over. You're never too old to be strong. I'm proof of that.